All right, welcome to another Monday. It's April 6th, so we have about a month to go. Again, of course, we're not going to have a final or a final test. This is a design class, so that's not the way that this is going to go. It never goes that way, which is a good thing for you guys. But today, I just wanted to kind of introduce the next week, the next project. As we enter the last month, you're going to see that the work that we get to do now is building off of everything that we've done. In the first part of the semester, we worked on spatial relationships, and now we're working on, typography and working in different elements to move around typography and the relationship between everything. And so now we're going to do a project that I think will be really fun for you guys. It's something that is in high demand in the design world, someone that can do something like this. And it's combining all these different things we've talked about, especially space, and then working bodies of text and titles and other things into those kind of practices. So today we're going to talk a little bit about this week's project, of course, the kinds of things that I'm looking for. I'll give you a project overview and something else too that I'm going to add in. I'm not going to do a critique of your guys' finals today. I think that I showed them once in their first versions, and I think you guys will do some things to make some improvements, of course. But if you have not turned that in yet, make sure that gets into me, because I think later in the week we'll do a discussion. It won't be a ton of writing, but I want you guys to be able to share your guys' work in that environment, and also this time, instead of me always making the critique about your guys' work, you guys will be doing that to each other's stuff. So I think that gives us a different sort of critique practice, and I'm not sure yet when we'll start that, but look for that being announced this week. So I'll get right into it. I don't want this to last too long, because I think that as we go, you guys are getting smarter and understanding where I'm going when I'm showing you guys things. All right, so of course you'll notice that I've got a bunch of article layouts in my screen. I've tagged these in Pinterest. That's where I collect my stuff. And I wish these were sometimes larger. But I think, these types of designs are essentially doing a lot of the things that we've been practicing, okay? Of course, the balance between titles and, body copy and subtitles and, where little captions are and things like that. And being able to decide what fonts to use in titles and what font should be your body copy. Understanding those relationships is going to be, of course, an important practice. One thing you guys have already started doing in this week's project is understanding or practicing relationships between title fonts and imagery that you place inside of those ads that you did. So one thing I hope you guys realize is that there are, of course, unique and distinct relationships between those things, between images and font, between colors and font, and between colors and images. So now this is yet another piece of the puzzle that we're just paying a bit more attention to. You guys have been working with typography and font forever, but we're just going to be studying it a bit more in depth and in more detail too. So deciding what font to design with in a article layout type of situation, you have to understand the character of the entire thing and what the images also say about the entire design. In this case, of course, now split down the middle on a spread, we have something that is pretty common, a very large image on the left or the right, depends. Usually they're on the left because the text usually sits on the right because it leads into the next pages, right? So oftentimes you'll see a lot of imagery on the left side, and then designing copy to be sort of visually interactive and active on that right side. And sometimes you'll see in these other examples that they will oftentimes overlap too on both pages. But the character of the design itself is made up by everything that you see. That font, if you can kind of just imagine these relationships, is a good pick in my mind for the image of the Mayor Bloomberg there, the former Mayor Bloomberg at least. And so hopefully you guys can kind of, when you're thinking about what you want to do for this project, and I'll talk about it in a bit, what images are going to go into this design that are going to be, obviously a good representation of the content, but also what other things are going to pair well with that. What colors, what fonts, the list goes on. Of course, now we're focusing on font, but one thing that I'm going to emphasize is I'm paying attention to how well those relationships are established. All around, does it look cohesive? Does it look like it's got one voice visually? So let me show you guys a few more of these. Again, sometimes you can be ultra creative with your font and work it within your text. You can do some shaped text like that, or actually layer text behind text boxes. That's pretty ambitious. So sometimes when you decide to go more copy heavy, you might find yourself doing more things like that. And this is an example where we have more overlap, and the opacity and the imagery allows us to make some white text over there. But as you can see, this is not just text boxes piled on top of text boxes. It is sort of, but they're pieced together in a way that sort of, when someone looks at this, they might think, okay, I can probably get through this because I can, I'll start here, then I'll go here. And so think about how heavy sometimes text looks when you first look at a layout. Is it overwhelming? Sometimes you can ease some of that with sectioning different things like this. Again, of course, your treatment, the treatments that you make and apply to your images and how you apply them inside of this idea, inside of your layouts is so important. And I want you guys to pay attention to two main things. Of course, colors matter too, but I think those choices come more natural as we go. Finding and treating and applying images in a very, very intentional, impactful manner. And then, of course, doing the same thing with your text, and of course picking font sizes, font faces, and combining the right fonts together very, very intentionally too. So I could go on about that for forever, but I'm not going to. That would be rather boring. You can also be, and one thing I've talked about quite a bit in the first part of the year was being minimalistic with your usage of space. Negative space, of course, can mean different things, but to me, it's your intentional leaving of white space to create, a certain feeling that someone gets when they see this or read this. Sometimes it feels a little bit easier to digest if there's more white area. It just kind of, it's easy to explain that way because I think that we've all sort of been there. I think that it's easier for us to consume content when there's some more blank space present within our designs. But that doesn't mean you have to include that or have that as your theme. We all have our preferences. Some of us really like super active and interactive visually, these kinds of layouts, or there's things going on everywhere. There's a lot of layers, a lot of colors, a lot of artwork, a lot of motion. But things like this are really cool too. There's not one good way to design. This is another good example of doing these concepts well. And of course, ultimately, our goal is to create interest through the design activity that we decide to conduct and apply to the space that we're given. Now, with the 2-page spread, 11 by 17, it does give you quite a bit of real estate to work with. And I think you guys will be creative about that too. And of course, you guys should just dig and dig and dig for things, because if you find one thing that you like in Pinterest, it's going to give you a bunch of different other things that are similar. And so I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with all these different kinds of layering. Let me try to open this article. And being very also vivid in color. So there's, like I said, there's so many ways to design layouts well. So many different styles you can access to make that happen. So, do explore. And of course, whichever article you choose, that will obviously impact the kind of style that you design with. One more thing too, sometimes you can, use an image as the background and then work in text in areas that fit. You can see that occurring in this design. Other options, don't want to forget about anything here. I pretty much covered most of it. You can be really differentiating and in the way that you treat different items, and there's a lot of activity here. And again, I think when you create good layout design, in the end, your end goal should be, of course, to make it visually interesting, but also to make sure that it's readable and digestible, because we all know how much no one likes to read. So this is a fun job of a designer. You get to take information, graphics, photos, titles, honestly, whatever might come with, stats, whatever might come with the article content that you choose, and you get to piece that together in a spread, in an area that we pre-designate. In this case, it's going to be 11 by 17. A layout usually consists of, 2 sheets side by side, and that doesn't mean to say that one-page layouts are not layouts, but I think that the general theme of practice here is doing things in a spread format like this. So this is just a few examples. You can I encourage you guys to go out and just check out a bunch of these, because I think you guys might be able to get some cool ideas if you do some exploring, of course. Now, obviously, don't copy anybody. Don't want to see that, but do be influenced. I welcome you guys to be impacted and influenced by good design. That's the only way that we become good designers ourselves. Okay, so I've given you guys enough, I think, just background information, and the purpose, basically, as a recap, is that we're learning now how to piece, different elements together again, but this time incorporating larger amounts of text and learning how to visually balance things and make sure that at a glance that does grab visual interest for a reader, but also when you do hook someone and they become engaged in what you've designed, how will you keep them, in its readability? So both things are important. So your assignment is, as such, we're going to be creating a 2-page spread that will sit side by side. Both are 8.5 by 11 inches. So together it's an 11 by 17 spread. But one thing you can do, I'll open up InDesign here real quick to make it, I'll just show you guys how I set up my document when I'm doing something like this. Wait for it to load. I've always admired those screens. I'm not really sure what that has to do with InDesign, but regardless. So a lot of times what I'll do, and when you start a new document, the whole facing pages thing might be sort of confusing, for example. So if I create new, and this is probably what I'd recommend each of you doing, select the print tab, and then of course do a letter. You can do a tabloid on its side, but you don't see the natural break in between pages. So honestly, I would do a letter size, 2 sheets, face the pages because you want them to kind of like sit next to each other, but make the start page number 2. If you don't do that, you'll have a page hanging out here as your cover page, and that's totally fine too. That's helpful when we're doing the full thing, but we're just worried about 2 sheets that sit side by side within a publication. So your job is to do this. Go to your favorite website for news. Oh, I'm trying to get ESPN, not Elder Scrolls. And even though I love Skyrim, just a side note. For example, it could be USA Today. It could be anything. It could be your favorite fashion blog. But what it has to be something that you find online. You can't, it makes no sense, or it doesn't do as much good to redesign something that's already been put into this format. I think the challenge arises in taking something that's been published elsewhere and then adapting that for print. So, for example, if I were to take, these are all kind of sad. Let's go with this one. Has to do with some kind of picks for an all-decade team for the NFL. People are so bored right now that they're just doing these things, which is fine. And there's some graphics here too, which might give you an example of the kinds of things that could be good for your images or something, or as your text, because we all know that athletic kinds of text are much different than elegant kinds you might see in fashion magazines and so forth. But your job is to take the titles and the content and basically taking as much of the content as you can. Now, you can also assume too that you might just be doing the first 2 pages and that it might extend into a third, maybe 4th page. So don't feel like you have to grab the entire article. But of course, if you don't, you might have to put something like an arrow or something as an indicator that this does move on to a 3rd page. So your job is to take that content and you're going to be pasting that and basically designing that content from that article into a designed spread that's printed. Now, I think this is kind of an exciting project. This is one that I had when I was a student, and I loved it. So I'm not going to talk too much more about it. I'm going to kind of leave it open-ended on purpose to see where you guys run with it. But I want you to take just an article that hopefully it's something not about coronavirus. Let's try to stay away from that. I think we're all kind of tired of hearing about that crap. But, whichever that thing is that you like. And I would also recommend that you find something in an area that you really enjoy, because I think doing design is definitely enhanced by doing something that you are a fan of. So that's your assignment. And of course, this is a blank canvas in InDesign. And now it's your job to imagine how that content can be filled and designed in ways that, going back to our material here, is visually interactive, impactful, but also readable, and also on brand and in relationship to what it's about. That's your assignment. So my recommendation, Anthony, is that you do this in InDesign. In fact, I'm going to make InDesign the requirement for where you do this. And if you don't have the program for some reason, let me know and we'll work something out. But this is what InDesign was built for. Okay? So it's important that you guys practice its tools and know it and understand it, because that's something that it's probably the most used program for designers right now. Again, this will be your setup, and then save this as an InDesign file, export it as a PDF. By the way, one last thing, one final tip. If you go to File, Export as a PDF, we'll just call it as untitled, that's fine. You want to choose the print version. Interactive PDF activates some interactive functions that are very rare these days. So this is important. Usually in a default export on high quality, it's going to export in pages. What that will do is put this page on its own, and then you'll have to scroll down there a bit and you'll find the second page under it. So it splits those. You want to make sure that you export this in spreads. So all you have to do is click this, and if you click export, it's going to export this into a PDF with these two side by side, which is what we want. So don't forget that part. That's all for now. Have some fun with this. Look for a discussion sometime in the near future. I might push a critique discussion off after this project because this one's a little bit more involved. But yeah, find an article that is in an area that you are a fan of, whatever that might be. It can be anything. And design that into a printed magazine spread, essentially. So obviously do some research. Look at things that you like. This is just a few things that I pulled. But there's so many things out there, guys. There's so many things out there that you can do. And if you like Photoshop, like Illustrator, use those assets to your advantage and bring those things into InDesign as part of your finished product. that's your assignment. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. And of course, as always, if you have any questions at all, just let me know and we'll take care of those, okay? So, we'll talk soon. You guys have a good week.